Friends, we are gathered here today because I made a mistake. I have been reading about 5 books a week. That's the average that I've been leveling out to. So I thought, hey, wouldn't it be fun if I read all of the Bromance Book Club books, because there are 5 of them and I have them all. I knew the general premise of the series going into the books, where it's like a group of guys and they read romance books in order to like navigate the difficulties that they're having in their romantic relationships. And I'd only ever heard good things about this series. Like, I'd heard raves, especially when the first book came out, about how good it is, how fun it is. So that's obviously why I acquired those books. I was like, oh, this is like gonna be like a fun series to like eventually get to. And here we are, and we've gotten to it. And I'm not gonna say that the hype was overhyped. I'm just gonna say I was not the audience for this series. Generally speaking, reading romances from a male perspective as like your primary protagonist just isn't it's not my cup of tea. I tend to prefer reading books from female perspectives. That's just the way my brain is. Men rarely deserve rights. So generally when I'm reading fiction to like unwind, I'm not reading from that perspective. But I thought, hey, the hype was there. Maybe Alyssa K. Adams does something that's different, that's gonna make me really like get rid of that perception about reading from that perspective. But then I met Gavin in the Bromance Book Club and I quickly was like, do I read the rest of these books, or do I just unhaul them and call it? Like, do I just say bye and give them to someone? But then I found myself enjoying Undercover Bromance, so I was like, maybe it was just like that first book wasn't for me. Maybe the rest of the books are gonna be good. And then I read Crazy Stupid Bromance, and then it quickly backtracked, and I was like, do I continue on the series again? This series is kind of like that on again, off again relationship, where when they're treating you well, they're really treating you well, and you're like, oh my god, like, love this. But then they do something that reminds you of why you were broken up in the first place, and then they'd quickly do something else that you really enjoy, and you're like back and forth, back and forth. That's how I felt about this series while I was reading it. There was a lot of whiplash happening. And I feel like that experience was exacerbated by the fact that I was reading all of these books in 1 week. Because normally when you're reading from one author, they release a book a year, and sometimes the book doesn't hit, and then you just read the next one, and then that one hits. Reading it in such a condensed timeline really made it obvious when I was really enjoying a book and when I was really not hitting with the book. I could not tell you when I was gonna enjoy a book from the synopsis. I just started going into the books being like, we'll figure it out as we're reading. So before I dive into like the overalls of what I like and don't like about this series, I figured I'd give you a rundown of each of the books in case you were considering picking any of them up, so that I can help you navigate this series in a way that I didn't navigate since I was exploring uncharted territory. So first up we have the Bromance Book Club. This is the first book in the series, obviously, because that's what the series name is based off of. We follow Gavin. He is a baseball player in the major leagues. I don't know, minor leagues. Don't ask me to explain any of the sports stuff that's in these books. I just la-la-la'd through that section. Sports girlies will love it. Not a single brain cell was latching on to anything that was being told to me. So he's hit the highlight of his career. He's hit some kind of like home run that's especially special. He like runs all 4 bases with home run. I don't know what, a grand slam, I think is what it was called, maybe. So that happens. So then he goes home and he's like getting hot and heavy with his wife because he's so excited that he's hit his career high. And then he learns that he's never given his wife an orgasm. She's just been faking it their entire marriage. And he gets really angry in a way that I didn't understand the character motivations at all in this book. So he gets really angry, he leaves. We actually start the book with him being drunk in a hotel room, having already experienced all of this stuff. And the Bromance Book Club appears out of nowhere into his hotel room, and they're like, hey, we're gonna take you into our club, we're gonna let you read this book, and we're gonna help you navigate like how to get your wife back. This is the only book in the series that actually takes like that book club element, and we actually get chapters from the book that Gavin is reading. It's quickly abandoned. Like, we barely get chapters of other books in the series anymore. We also do get the wife's perspective. We don't only get Gavin's, but she didn't feel as fleshed out to me as some of the other characters that we get in the rest of the series. And I think that was part of the problem I was having with this first book, was like, I didn't care if Gavin got back together with his wife. I didn't want him to. I thought he was being bratty. I thought he didn't learn anything, and why would I root for him to get back with his wife if he was just gonna be a mid partner, you know? I was navigating this drama with them, and I was like, truly none of this impacts me in any way as a reader, so I'm just here for vibes, and I don't really like the jock protagonist, so what am I really here for in the end of things? But again, sports girlies probably would love this guy. It just was not for me. So then we hit Undercover Bromance. I sort of had the suspicion that I was gonna like this one more than the Bromance Book Club, because we meet Mac in the Bromance Book Club. He is a business owner. He is one of the founders of the book club because he's been reading romance since he was a teenager. And so he's already shed a lot of the misogynistic things that Gavin had to unlearn in the first book, which was not fun to read. And I really liked the female protagonist. In this one, she's a sister of the wife from the first book. She's like the classic protagonist for one of these books, where she's like feisty, she speaks her mind. She and Mac don't really get along in the beginning. It had all of those elements that are traditionally more common in a romance book, so I knew that at least this was gonna at least be a 3-star read for me. Mac is your stereotypical rom-com hero. He is charming, he can flirt really well, he's good with women, but at like the core of him, he just wants to be in a cute little romantic relationship and he's ready to settle down. So the premise of this book is that Liv is working at a really fancy restaurant and this chef has been sexually harassing his employees. She finds out, she's like, I'ma fuck you up, I'ma take you down. And she goes to Mac for some help because she knows that he has like multiple restaurants. She's like, hey, this girlie is being harassed, can you get her a job? And so then they begin working together on how to take down this chef. I found, like, overall, I'll talk about it later, but the books that are framed around the woman's problems and she is the external force that is pushing the plot along, those ones are leagues better in my opinion. There's one exception to it, but I did enjoy the plot elements of those books more. This book was fun enough that it made me want to continue reading the series because I was like, hey, maybe Gavin was just the dud of the group and I will enjoy the rest of them. But then we get to Crazy Stupid Bromance. This one, I didn't read the synopsis for. I just was like, I'm gonna just go into this. We're gonna see if it's a hit or a miss because it can be either or now. I've learned that I can like Lyssa Kay Adams, but I can also dislike her books. So this one had the best premise of all of them in my opinion. It was absolutely bonkers. So Alexis is at the heart of this book. She was one of the women that was being harassed by the chef in book 2, and so she has a cafe where women who have been sexually assaulted go to like talk to other women, to like find a support group basically. And she is approached by a woman at this cafe and she thinks that woman has been assaulted, but she just isn't comfortable enough to talk yet. But then she finds out this woman is actually her sister who found her basically through 23andMe. And their dad, who she's never had contact with, is dying. He needs a kidney. None of them are a match, but they think that Alexis might be. So the premise alone, bonkers. I was obsessed with this premise. It did not deliver quite what I needed it to. It was a little less dramatic than I was hoping for. I was hoping for like soap opera level drama, and it was very easily like resolved basically. She was like, she was too nice of a person in my opinion, and like sometimes you just need a messy character, and she was just too kind. And so was the male interest in this. His name's Noah. He does some kind of hacking stuff. I don't know, he calls himself a hacktivist, which was really funny. And just the two of them were just so nice and they just got together so easily, so smoothly that there was no friction in this book. I think that was my problem with it, was there was no friction. Everything just went the way it was supposed to go basically. There was also this weird subplot about like a woman who worked across the street from Alexis who wanted to shut down her business because she was like a hater basically, and it just felt so much like a non-issue. There was never really a threat that that woman was going to succeed, so I don't know why it was really included other than to make a point that some women don't believe other women when they say they've been sexually assaulted. So it felt kind of like too inserted into the story. It was a solid like 2.5 because it was just like, it wasn't bad, it wasn't good, it was just there in the middle of it all. But then we meet It Bromantic, and this one I was concerned about because Vlad in the entire series up until this point, he's just there for comedic relief. He's there to be funny. The two things we know about this man are that he is Russian and that he has stomach issues. That is it. That is all we know. And I'm like, oh no, is this going to be an entire book of just like bad jokes? But little did I know Vlad was gonna become my baby. He is a sweetheart. I would die for Vlad. Sort of similar to with Mac, he didn't have anything to unlearn. He was raised by good, strong women. He was surrounded by women in his life. He views them as complex human beings. And he is in touch with his emotions. He knows how to sing when he's having issues. He knows how to use his words. And I really appreciated that about this character. He was just like a big softie. I feel like that's what was my problem with Gavin, was that he was just all jock, all bro. Vlad has his bro elements, but he's silly and goofy and sweet. And that balance was perfect. And I got it. If like all of the sportsy bro characters had that kind of personality, I'd be like, okay, I get it. So the story behind this one is that he marries his best friend from home to bring her to the US so that she can like live a better life because her entire family has died. Her dad was a journalist who like poked his head into the wrong situation and got killed, and she takes up the mantle of trying to uncover this story while she's in the US because she's going to school to be a journalist. They both always liked each other, but they just have never told each other, and in order to protect themselves and their feelings, they just like separate themselves so they don't have to be together. Vlad has been trying to make this like relationship more romantic, and she's like, no, I can't do this because I'm gonna put myself in danger, like he doesn't think that way about me, sort of vibes. And I'm a sucker for those tropes, so I obviously enjoyed this one a lot. I also thought that the side characters in this one were really funny. There's like a group of women who I think they call themselves the loners, but basically all of their husbands who died, and they are obsessed with Vlad and very protective of him, and I thought that was like a cute side friendship that was kind of missing from the other books, where everyone knows everyone else in the series basically, so you're not meeting anyone new. So I really liked that element of the story being brought in. This was just like a silly, goofy, fun time. I feel like it didn't take itself seriously. There's a whole kidnapping at the end of this book which truly was a wild ride. I enjoyed it a lot. And then in that book we meet the protagonist. I knew as soon as I read him that he was going to be the protagonist of the next book. This one follows Colton. He is a country star, which anytime there's something about like some kind of celebrity, like that kind of trope, I love reading about it. And if there's one thing I've learned about myself is that I really enjoy a holiday rom-com. It did put me a little bit in the Christmas spirit in January, which was fun. So it had all of the fixings of a good holiday rom-com that I enjoy. There was like a Christmas Scrooge that needed to be taught the meaning of Christmas. It was giving like a little bit of Nashville vibes for me, and I really enjoyed the female protagonist as well. She comes from like a rich family, has a rich family, people problems, and that is the reason that she can't be with Colton. They have like this really nice on-off again, like they're really attracted to each other, but she's the one that's holding back sort of relationship problems. I feel like the end of the book was kind of all over the place. Colton's reactions to some stuff that happens, he says some stuff that I was like, I would not forgive this man for what he said. So I didn't really enjoy the end of this book, but it was overall a good vibe, and I did enjoy it more than I enjoyed Bromance Book Club and Undercover Bromance, so it at least is up there for me. You'd realize after me giving you all of these rundowns that basically the romance book element of this that they're supposed to be reading throughout these books was given up after the first one. That one we got like chapters throughout the book, enough to the point that we got a full arc of like the story within the story. But the other books, they're like thrown in chapters here or there. The only other one that really utilizes it as a plot point is Isn't It Bromantic, because Vlad wants to be a romance writer, so he's actually writing a romance throughout the book about him and his wife, which I thought was really cute and a good twist on the premise. Not surprisingly, the MacBook, which had like zero romance book element in it in terms of like people reading stuff, was also one of the more enjoyable ones for me. And again, I think it's because he didn't have anything to unlearn, and that part, that framework was a problem that I was having overall with the series. I didn't want to read about men unlearning their misogynistic viewpoints, you know? And it felt sort of like preachy when the men were being like, this is why this is important. Like it was like, as a woman reading that, you're like, yeah, that makes sense. I also found that in the Bromance Book Club and Isn't It Bromantic, the woman's external issues, so the things that she was dealing with in her personal life, were often pushed to the side when the guy decided this is the point where we were gonna get it back together, and then they were brought back in as the third act foil. And it was just something that I happened to notice because I was reading these books so closely together, because they're far apart enough in the series that if you've been reading year to year, it wouldn't be something that you would immediately notice. But it did end up making especially Isn't It Bromantic feel a little rushed at the end. So the real problem here was like these books for the most part just weren't for me. Alyssa K. Adams can write, and she has a good premise. Like she can come up with the most bonkers ideas for these stories that are fun to read about. But sometimes the characters are just not characters I am personally interested in, and sometimes the like situation that these characters are in is just like not dramatic enough for me to really invest myself in. And so like I'm not recommending the series. It's just if you're a reader like me who really likes dramatic stuff and who doesn't like characters who have to unlearn misogynistic traits, this might not be something that you need to add to your TBR. And those are all my thoughts on this series. That was like 1,600 words that I wrote to remember what I wanted to talk about. If you guys have read this series, let me know what your thoughts are in the comments. I will see you in my next video, whatever that is. And until then, happy reading.